All right, bottom of the hour now here at the KFYR Plus News Desk. And today we are joined by Rory Safir, founder of Safir Law, nationally recognized criminal defense attorney and forensic lawyer scientist, to break down now a critical question. When can federal agents legally enter a home? We're clarifying the Fourth Amendment amid rising concerns about federal enforcement activity. Mr. Safir, welcome to the News Desk. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you guys having me.
So, what does the Fourth Amendment actually protect when it comes to a person's home?
So, federal agents like ICE, for example, they are able to go door to door, so to speak, but there is still, of course, the Fourth Amendment. So they actually need what is called a judicial warrant, which is something that is signed by a judge or a magistrate, and you would see that at the bottom of the warrant. To be able to enter without consent, or there are other exceptions, like, for example, hot pursuit if they are chasing a suspect, or if there's some kind of emergency in there. But for probably ever going to come up. So really, they need the judicial warrant or consent. And what they most commonly have are what are called administrative warrants, and those are not signed by a judge or magistrate. And that's the easiest way to tell, because they'll be signed by someone internal or someone within the agency.
Okay, yeah, that was going to be my next question. What is the legal difference between a judicial warrant and an administrative warrant?
So a judicial warrant, again, as I was saying, it will be signed by a judge or magistrate, and it will allow them to it'll have to say, a specific person or place to define the scope of the warrant that the judge signed, and then they are able to, basically carry out that warrant. An administrative warrant will not have that. It's usually some kind of ICE form or administrative document that they'll carry.
And that's still legal. That's still legal to search a home with an administrative warrant.
It is not legal under the Fourth Amendment.
Okay.
Unless they have
legal.
consent or one of those exceptions that I mentioned that in generally wouldn't come up in immigration enforcement.
What happens if, as you mentioned, they do get a judicial warrant and they're looking for John Doe, and they find John Doe, and then Jane Doe is also in that house, and she also, for whatever reason, do they take Jane Doe as well, or do they have to come back with another warrant?
Well, I guess it depends on what, I would need a little bit more information for this hypothetical.
More context. Hypothetical? It would be for the ICE reasons. That seems to be a pretty hot topic for, if the Immigration and Customs Enforcement were to come into my home at 402 2nd Street, whatever, and they said, I understand that you have John Doe here. He's illegal. And they come into my home, they find John Doe, but Jane Doe, who's also here, maybe not legally. But the warrant does not say anything about Jane Doe.
I think that may be kind of an unusual circumstance, in the sense that, they probably would know who is in that house and what they're looking for. I suppose if that did happen, they could potentially detain Jane Doe if they had a reasonable suspicion that she was in the United States illegally, and then go get a warrant. Or if they, if she said something, rather than using her right to remain silent, and gave them probable cause, perhaps they wouldn't need a warrant. But otherwise, yeah, they probably would be able to detain her if they, in this hypothetical at least.
Under what circumstances can federal agents legally enter a home without a judicial warrant then? And you mentioned, I guess, by just giving them permission to walk in, I suppose. Is that it?
Yeah, that's the most common way that you're going to see them gain entry, legally at least, is through consent. The other exceptions to the warrant rule are, if they're just going door to door, those aren't going to come up. Those again would be if there's some kind of emergency that's very clear, or if they're chasing a suspect. But if
In
they're going door
pursuit.
to door,
Yeah.
that's not going to come up.
If officers show paperwork at the door, what should a resident look for to understand whether to allow its entry?
So again, you want to make sure that it's a judicial warrant. So it needs to be signed by a judge or magistrate. So it'll be judge so and so, or something at the bottom. Whereas if it's a administrative warrant or administrative document, it'll be some kind of internal ICE form. So it's not going to have a judge's signature on it. Uh, so yeah, they make sure they have the warrant, because a lot of times they'll say, for example, we have the warrant, but we don't want to show you, or we're getting it. Just let them, just, you don't have to. I mean, you can do what you want, but you don't have to let them in. You can wait for them to get the warrant and show it to you.
What authority does ICE have with an administrative warrant when they're standing at someone's door? Judicial, obviously, you've got to let them in. But with the administrative warrant, that is from somebody within the administration, I suppose, as you mentioned. So what kind of standing do they have when they're at your front door? Can you just tell them, kick rocks, get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, you can tell them, if they don't have a judicial warrant, that you're asking them. Well, you are asking them, you're not going to answer any questions, and that you would like them to leave your property. And then maybe they come back with a warrant, or maybe not. But you are not required to open the door absent them having a warrant. Yeah, and they might try to ask you, get you to engage in some kind of question and answer, and then maybe they try to get your consent.
What actions at the doorway cross the constitutional line into an unlawful entry?
I would say forced entry, or if they were gaining consent through some kind of deceptive manner, where they're where it's not real consent. That would be something that might potentially be litigated. But I think what we're most commonly seeing is just forced entry with like a battering ram or something.
What about asking an underage child, let's say a 10-year-old or somebody that's young enough, maybe they don't understand what's going on, they allow the ICE operation or whoever, law enforcement operators, into your home? Is that considered lawful if they're asking a minor?
What is the minors? Is it someone who lives at the house, or what is their relation to the house?
Yeah, so the minor is the child that lives in the house, but they ask to come in, and you've said no, but the child doesn't know, and he's at the back door, and they allow him in.
I mean, that would definitely be something that's probably would be litigated. Although I'm sure they would go in if that happened. And then I guess the trouble would be trying to litigate that later and say, was that actually consent or not? And a judge would have to look at all the facts and decide.
How does the law treat shared housing situations, for example, roommates, landlords, or guests granting consent?
So this may vary by state, but in general, under the Fourth Amendment, you can, if you've got, say, different folks that live at the same house, you could consent for someone to enter into like the common areas, like living room or something that's shared, but you can't consent to enter someone else's private space. So say I'm John Doe and I'm living with Jane Doe. I can consent for them to enter, but I cannot consent for them to go into Jane Doe's room.
Okay. For the purposes of just having an argument, what happens if they were to find drugs in that common area? Can they just expand that search area then into John and Jane Doe's rooms?
That is another exception to the warrant rule. It is what's called plain view. So if they are, in the course of that warrant, if they were to see something that was immediately apparent to be some kind of controlled substance or narcotics, then yes, they could seize that. Then, I mean, this is, again, ICE is not law enforcement though, so they may need to call in the local police potentially. And then depending on what the warrant says, they may need to get a new warrant. So there's all kinds of, I don't know how much into detail you want to go, but then there's questions of what's called constructive possession, which has to do with proving knowledge and control of those narcotics. So especially if you have multiple people living in the house, the police would need to do some kind of investigation.
Sure. Mr. Safir, what exactly can someone say or do if they want to assert their rights politely and safely at the door?
Bob, you can say that you're not going to answer questions and that you would like a lawyer.
Does refusing consent to enter impact someone's legal situation or immigration case?
No, I think that is a common misconception that you are in some way not cooperating by utilizing your constitutional rights. There's a reason that the Bill of Rights exists. We have quite a few rights. Among them are our Fourth Amendment rights to no illegal searches or seizures. And consent is probably the most common way that either federal agents or law enforcement or otherwise are able to get around that warrant rule.
And can you explain what the Castle Doctrine does and does not allow when it comes to encounters with federal officers?
Yes, so the Castle Doctrine, again, this is going to vary by state to some extent, but many states have, given that your home is kind of got the highest degree of privacy, there is something known as Castle Doctrine in many states where it's kind of based around the idea of self-defense, where if it's not really written for law enforcement or federal agents, because it more has to do with like if a private individual were to break into your house, you could potentially defend yourself. And again, depending on where the local laws potentially with deadly force, it's not written really for law enforcement or federal agents. You would look at it kind of like say you're resisting an arrest that's, you think's unlawful. So, I mean, depending on the state, you could potentially do that legally. It would be heavily litigated, I'm sure. Practically, I do not recommend that at all. I do not. I mean, if you think about it, say even if you're validated and you're defending yourself, say they come in with unmarked unmarked uniform and a mask, and you're not sure, but they're just going to send more agents. So it's just going to lead to worse and worse circumstances for you, even if it is determined that you're ultimately right. So I do not recommend any kind of violence.
Bigger picture, how should people balance cooperating with law enforcement and protecting their own constitutional rights?
Well, I mean, I can only speak to what the rest of the country is seeing on the news and social media and so forth. And that's often, just to be bipartisan, that's often without context. So we don't know necessarily, everything that's going on in the background. But what it seems like may be happening is that even U.S. citizens are being detained, whether it's lawful or unlawful. And so, for example, while historically you don't need to carry any kind of identification paperwork as a U.S. citizen, I would still recommend carrying either a passport or better than that, a passport card. And I mean, you can either take the path of least resistance. And if you're questioned by, say, ICE, even if it's an unlawful detention, if you try to assert your rights in that kind of situation, they're going to detain you. And well, I don't know that for sure, but that seems to have happened in some cases.
Yep.
Where you're going to get detained for 8 to 40. I mean, they can't detain you forever, but it's not going to be a good time. So if you can avoid that, I would have your passport on you, or again, the passport card's a little better, just so that if you don't want to lose your passport. So practically, yeah, I mean, I would say, it takes a while for due process to work itself out. Enforcement is always going to come first, and then all this stuff will probably be litigated in the future, I would imagine. But practically speaking, there are things that you need to do in my opinion, to protect yourself.
For those that do not have passports, I, for one, I'm not a passport carrier. What other identification should I have?
So again, it's going to be similar to like if you're trying to get a driver's license or something, but generally
Okay.
you need to have some a birth certificate and like for example a ID. So that ID is going to have a picture of you, and so there it's going to show the ICE agent that yeah, this is not a fake document. This is who this he or she says they are. If you are not born in the U.S., you could have like naturalization paperwork combined with an ID. Um, there may be others. Those are the two that immediately jump to me if you don't
Okay.
have a passport.
And Mr. Severe, where can viewers turn for accurate, trustworthy information about their rights during federal enforcement activity?
So I am all over social media. My name is so commonly mispronounced, so I didn't bother to correct you, but it's actually Safer. So my
Safer?
handle is
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah, no worries. It's judges get it. Either way, it doesn't matter. But it's the Safer Lawyer. So TheSaFirLawyer. I post all kinds of helpful uh, content. I have some guides on what you might consider doing if you find yourself in some of these situations that we talked about.
Fantastic. Mr. Safer, thank you so much for helping us better understand our rights, more importantly, the Fourth Amendment rights here this afternoon. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate your time as well, and I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you, sir. Take care. All right, 46 minutes now past the hour. We'll take a quick break here at the news desk. When we come back, we've got more of the day's top news stories next.